You are now listening to the Low Hanging Fruits podcast. Listener discretion is advised.
Chop, chop, chop.
Now, okay, we start recording
Good job.
again.
All right. Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Low Hanging Fruits podcast. I am Lauren.
I'm Constance.
I am Luna.
And I'm Yuri, or Kelsey, or Autismo Cat. Hello there.
It's a great name.
All
by
right.
the
Well,
way.
I think we've got a pretty fucking cool episode for today.
Oh, God.
Today we're going to be talking about a little something called pride. Maybe you've heard of it. Maybe you've enjoyed it. Should it have kink? And should we think the children?
Fuck them kids. Not in
Fuck
that
them
way.
kids.
Wait, no,
Fuck them
not in that way. You know oh God. I mean,
Before we
metaphorically.
before we really get into this, does anyone on this podcast have the opinion that kink should not be at Pride?
Nope. Not gonna
No,
hear
okay,
that from
good.
me.
Cool, cool.
Yeah, nobody here fucking sucks.
I'll be honest. I might have had hang-ups about it if I hadn't dated my ex, who was like super like. Well, here's the thing. I think people don't understand that like sexuality and kink are quite separate. It's kind of a hard thing like for normies to get.
What the tricky part about explaining it to people who don't already get it is that kink and sexuality are heavily linked, but also separate things.
And I learned that because my
And-
ex was asexual but very kinky.
Yeah, and both sides of that claim matter to the kink at Pride discourse. Because kink, because Pride is about marginalized sexualities and sexual expression that has been suppressed by society at large, which covers LGBT people and covers kink. But also, kink is not necessarily about sex. And so when people say, oh, it's automatically the sexual thing, you're doing sex acts in front of children, no, we're not.
Like that photo's been going around of like the gay guys with the furry, not the furry hats, the fox hats. Not hats, but
Cosplay.
the masks,
Yeah.
And they're like, it's like a little girl holding like flowers and just like being like amused by it, and everybody's like, look at these fucking perverts. And it's like basically just like, oh, this is like literally pedophilia, basically.
Yeah.
Just
When I don't know, when I was a kid, if I saw like someone in like pup clothes or leather stuff, I'd just be like, oh, that's a neat costume.
yeah.
It's one of those things that's only sexual once you understand the proper context. To someone outside looking in, they have no idea. It just looks like a costume.
Look, even kids at that age like don't get the like how to say this. Like they don't even
If they're old enough, if they're old enough to know what it is, they're old enough to handle it.
Yeah. And I mean like like personal experience, like kid would just wait, how do I say this? Like mommy's got like a boyfriend, that means they kiss. Quite literally. That's been in my situation. So like if you think they're gonna get any of this stuff, like the higher like supposedly quote unquote explicit stuff, that's not how it works. Kids are quite they're quite curious about stuff, but the way their minds work is like it's gonna take a while for them to get it.
Yeah, and they're curious, but they're satisfied by simple answers. If a
Exactly.
parent doesn't feel like explaining to a kid what a leather daddy is, they can just be like, "Oh, it's a costume," and the kid will accept that.
And it's not a lie. It's not a lie. You don't have to lie to
No, it
them
isn't.
about it. It's just
Yeah, it's a simplified version of the truth.
it's a bit of
I
milk
am-
before getting to oh god. No, that's not a bad analogy. I was gonna say like it's a bit of milk before the meat, but no.
Oh no.
Oh god.
And like,
that was like I was trying to reference like Paul of Tartarus. Like fuck, it's not how it goes. Let's try and be clever.
Gold star, you tried.
Okay.
Well, listen, my mom explained sex to me when I was like 5. I asked, and then she just gave me a truthful answer because she figured I was ready to
Yeah,
like know what
I-
it is. So I
think-
understood. I understood like, oh, it's not just like when people like love each other. It's like you can have sex. It's the I mean, she's heterosexual and like Christian, so she gave me like very much that kind of answer
Hmm.
that you would expect a heterosexual woman to give, where it's like, oh, you penis in the vagina, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, which makes me worry
Wrong.
for her. But it's even then, like that answer was better than just being like, oh, we'll tell you when you're older.
And
We're
what
kind
what
of
they mean?
similar. I asked, the where how is Babby formed, and they told me.
Yeah,
And what they mean by sometimes when it gets older, what they mean is like stupid like sex ed in the American schools. And it's like, oh, thanks.
yeah, exactly. Well, like
Because everybody's so, but like,
you can't leave that shit to chance.
people are like so like ashamed or just like it's hard for me to get. Like, okay, like Canada is not this like wondrous, utopia regarding these things, but American prudishness is something else.
Hmm.
Yeah, Americans hate sex. It's all we talk about, and we fucking hate it.
But they can't stop fucking, so it's sort of like this
I hate my
self-flagellation
wife.
constantly.
Except self-flagellation can be for a point. There's no point to this.
Yeah, it's a boring kind of self-flagellation. Well, no, actually, no. There is the point.
Flagellation.
It's like
Yeah.
this sort of like really like it's quote unquote like the self-discipline, I guess, to just deny yourself like any earthly pleasures and just take whatever you're given. And
Except at the same time, we like force people to revel in that sort of in those pleasures. Like we say you should do this all the time and want it constantly, but also be ashamed that you're doing and wanting it. It's one of those things that's almost impossible to explain to someone who hasn't experienced it. It's one of those uniquely American hell kind of things.
Well, yeah, that's why I use the word Puritanism a lot,
Mhm.
because there's this distinctly American Protestant notion of like purity through abstinence, and like the idea that like, oh, kids are too pure, as if they didn't literally, as if they weren't conceived by sex, as if you didn't literally come out of somebody's like pussy and dick hole, like
Which is
what that's so foreign to you all of a sudden just because you're too small to do it yourself. That's kind of ridiculous if you really think about it.
But I think the mentions of calling it Puritanism ignores how
it's very
much.
secularized now too. Well, it's secularized in the sense that it doesn't need to be even an explicit mention of religion, but you know, when you dig, you just find there's like quite a similarity between this quote unquote supposed like secular like prudishness and the more Christian origin, religious motivation behind that attitude.
I guess,
Absolutely,
I mean,
absolutely.
I
That's
think
you.
Protestantism itself is kind of secularized in America. I
Yeah,
think that when you really look at it, like it's basically a like a pagan secular religion, essentially. And I don't think it's a surprise that some of the people who are like hyper like consent mongers about pride and kink are like witches and shit. Like I don't think it's surprising that like
really?
different groups of people, well, it attracts different groups of people. I mean, it attracts like the atheist crowd. I was talking to my mom about this the other day, and I think it's really true. And this is probably just like me reading Adorno and that coming out of me, but like Americans and just like some of our Western culture in general has like supplanted like the surety of like old Christian values and that all that implied with like a cult of rationalism. And
Hmm.
I think that ourselves as being exempt from all of the same thoughts that a religious person would be purely because we're not practicing. But I don't think that that's true.
Oh, it's
I
definitely
think
not
that on a
true.
certain level, we're basically like doing a lot of the same shit. And I mean, wait, think about this, okay? What's a thing that American Protestants, I mean, if they're not evangelicals, because those people are just evil. Um,
And they're
what's a
dying
thing that
out.
a
They're a
lot of
dying
American
breed. Like,
Protestants, right? Well, what's a thing that they're a cult. What's a thing that a lot of American Protestants believe? They believe we all worship the same thing. That's that they say that all the time, constantly. I mean, Meghan McCain wrote a book where she talks about the fact that we like all worship the same divine thing. You call it God, you call it whatever. That's what she said. And I think that that's really indicative of the mindset that I think a lot of those people have. This mindset that like what they think is real is at some level fundamentally grounded in what everybody else thinks. This idea that it's kind of all the same thing. And I think a lot of people who aren't Christians accept that as well. The
with the
idea that we're all
Constitution,
kind of in the same book.
you have the whole mythology of like the Constitution, the founding fathers, and like the sort of, I mean,
Yeah, there's definitely a way that
Well,
it's been.
that's American mythology, 100%.
There's absolutely a way it's been removed from the religious context. Again, you see a lot of the like atheist right wing sort of echoing the same like Puritanist ideas, but kind of circling back. What I was getting at was the idea that calling it Puritanism brings to mind like the you must remain celibate and chaste and free of temptation, all that. But it also kind of ignores how our culture forces that stuff upon us anyway, like deliberately pushes it in your face with sexuality and excess and all that, and then shames you for taking what it keeps putting in front of you.
Yeah.
That's
And I
actually
mean,
a really good fucking point.
And I mean, maybe the fact that you can actually, you're not, you the abstinence like isn't like people just awareness that you're gonna be tempted and you're going to sin, but the fact that you've quote unquote sinned is sort of like it makes it kind of like kinkier, where like the shame is like realer because like you've committed the act, so now you feel like the shame inside you. Oh, I've do you get what I'm trying to say?
Absolutely get what you're trying to say, but like I think something that's often missed when I even say that is that I'm saying it's the same groups doing both the putting the excess in front of you and the shaming you for taking it.
Well, I mean, I think
Mm.
in capitalism, my dog's making a lot of noise because he's eating his food. I think in capitalism, like that, the things that are being like put in front of us a lot of the time is for a profit model.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of the most overt sexuality is for profit. Like one of the examples that I've made previously is like Super Bowl commercials. It's like sexed up commercials and advertisements. It can be on TV, but a kid can't even say it. They can see it, but they can't understand it, which is
Oh,
kind of what you're talking about. And that's like evolves into this sense that you're supposed to feel guilty, a lot of people say, for understanding or doing this thing later in life. I think that's an amazing way of putting it, for the exact reason that it's exactly how Christians talk about Christianity itself as well. So you guys are familiar with that War on Christmas thing?
Yeah,
of
of course.
course.
Okay, so old school like Catholics always used to actually hate the way that Christmas was being propagated as this like for profit, like almost like a festival, almost like you're selling tickets to the birth of Jesus or something. Like
Mhm.
there's all of this materialism around it, not like not like historical materialism, the ideology or analysis. I mean like literal materialism, a material obsession with money and objects, everything bought and sold, Jesus's name on everything. That disgusted them, because to them the religion was something that was actually pure and above that. And I think that like what's happened now is you've seen a retreat of that kind of mindset over time, because you have to figure like if Christianity is the dominant religion and veneration of capitalism is the dominant ideology, then either one of those things would have to be defeated or one of them would have to transform to suit the other. And capitalism is not going to change to suit Christianity. I don't think, at least. I mean, who's steering the ship? I think could like commit like a religious war, like what the war in Iraq was, essentially. But like that's not the same thing. And I think that when you look at something like that, it really sticks out to me that that like this has been a huge cultural shift, that now a lot of the dominant Christian groups are very pro like capitalism and very pro materialism. And that kind of like obsession with money and that kind of like guiding force. I mean, I don't mean to imbue money with any kind of like divine power or anything, any kind of like fetishistic like power, but I do think that like
I think it has fetishistic power in the classic religious sense of the word fetish, where it is a symbol of something in people's heads greater than the physical object in
right.
front of
Well,
you.
I mean, I mean, I think to my understanding, that's what Mark's. My dog's really happy. He's rubbing his face on the couch for no reason. I don't know why he does that.
Money, if I
Oh,
well,
jeez.
I've been reading the
Well,
first chapter of
to my
Capital.
understanding, that's something that Marx was bothered about. This idea that people had this kind of like, what did he call it? Like commodity fetishism.
Yeah, commodity
This idea
fetishism.
that like
Well, here the
people
first cha-
treat commodities like the Ark of the Covenant.
well, the first chapter of Capital is basically just, he explains like, oh, commodities have like this two-side two-sidedness. It has like a use value and a value. And then he just like develops the value form, just kind of explains that the value needs like a necessary form of appearance, and like it just leads to the money form, which is the general equivalent. And then after he's done all that, there is the section on commodity fetishism where he uses all that to explain what's going on, and that like social relations between people become social relations between things through the the general equivalent.
Yeah, that was my recollection as well. But I was just thinking about in terms of like commodity fetishism and the idea that we imbue like commodities themselves with power, which I don't think is that was just the reason why I brought it up is I don't want to make it sound like Jesus Christ, man. He's going nuts.
My
He
cat's
wants his
doing the
hiccup going
same.
outside.
She's found a plastic bag and is just going nuts over it.
That's animals are crazy, dude. So I just wanted to avoid implying that like money in and of itself has some sort of like twisted power, some sort of like the idea that commodities are like making us do this. I don't think that that's true at a micro scale, but I do think that there's some sort of like
Well, we don't.
I we're bending to the I guess the logic of capitalism.
Well, the commodities have a power over us. We don't have the power over the commodities. The whole production process is just it's the object subject divide, right? Where like the subject is the commodity, the production, like that section, and we are like the objects, right? So technically we're supposed to be making objects, but actually the subjective. Oh my God, I can't pronounce it. You know, the subjectivity of the process
Subjectivity.
is in the objects we're making, the goods, which become commodities, and we are just we don't have a control over what's going on at all in the bigger
Yeah, I
bigger
think that's
picture.
true. Yeah, of
Just
course.
the impersonal domination.
I think kind of like sort of taking this back to the matter
Oh,
of like kink at pride. I
oh,
think that
actually, I had another point. So,
Mhm.
the thing about like advertisements, right? That like kids would like see super sexualized like Super Bowl like adverts. It's funny because I have a brother who like wasn't to the industry of like making adverts. And I remember when I was a kid, he would just he would tell my mom and like me that like every few years the minimum like age requirement for like okay, what is the target age, like the lowest common denominator that we can go to like make an advert, like the mental age required to see an ad and get it. And he kept telling me, he kept being lowered and lowered and lowered. And the lower it got, the better like the bosses found it. So that's like kind of interesting to think about that like these super sexualized like adverts probably have that going on too. Because yeah.
I mean, I mean, that's just another reason to have no patience with people who defend like capitalism on this issue, because I think that they've sort of accepted, even if they won't admit it, they've sort of accepted a degree of exploitation of children. And they just think that they can maybe regulate it away or that it's justified depending on what their ideology is. And I think that that's just never going to be true. And I think that if advertising demanded at a certain point in human history that we drink the blood of children, that we literally sacrifice the children to make the advertisement, I think that it would start happening.
I mean, there's been like something I like learned recently. I couldn't believe like it was actually real. Like, like back like it's not that long ago, but like during lynchings, like in the U.S. South, like people would just make postcards out of like people's hearts. Like no, but, like like would be like a like photo postcard. Like it wasn't
Did
just like a
not know
lynching.
that. That's really fucked up.
Oh no, like it was like it's funny because it was fun. I think it was like Finkelstein like bringing it up to just be like, look, it's like it gets nasty. Humans can get really nasty, and we just forget like what quote unquote like normal people have been able to do. And yeah, just like think about that.
Um, so like bringing it a little back to Kink at Pride. A lot of the people calling, what about the children? What about your children? You chose to have kids. Parenting is hard. It's not the queer community's job to make your job easier, you know?
What about the
We
queer
do
parents too? It's like
yeah, also that.
But I mean, it's funny because like when I recorded my video about this, I just leaned in and I was like, "Yeah, I fuck your children. I don't care. I hope they see it." Like
Yeah.
that's I'm sure like
Yeah.
nobody's sticking their dicks in kids at Pride. Come
No.
on. It's not fucking happening. And this whole like I have a right not to see your like sexuality bullshit, it's fucked up. Not true, by the way. I don't think that's personally, I don't think that's how consent works.
Well,
I'm not
I
sold
think
on that.
I think it is, but I think the people claiming that are using that being how consent works in bad faith. Because yes, it is their right to not have to see it, because we will allow them to look or walk away.
Right. Well, that's I mean that's one thing is I think you're allowed to not be forced,
they're not
right?
being locked in a
But it's
room.
it's it's different like because they're saying they have a right not to see it incidentally. And I think that's wrong.
That's absolutely wrong. Like, even the smallest Pride is in a pretty big area. You know, I don't think you'd put it anywhere smaller than like a city park. And so, like, there's a lot of space. If someone's doing something you don't want to see, go somewhere else. You're not locked in a tiny room with these people.
Right, yeah. Well, and it's also, I mean, again, the practicality of the situation is the way that it is these days is it's like a march, right?
Yeah, there's usually like a march and then like a festival area somewhere else.
Right. So like usually if you've been to Pride, you know that like people crowd around like the sides of like where people are marching. So like
If you've ever
and like
seen a
usually
parade, you know that.
yeah. So you don't, I mean, you'd literally have to like go there and like hang out there. Because if you're just walking past, just keep walking. I don't
Yeah.
yeah, I don't fucking see the problem. Also, this is something I noticed. A lot of the people doing the what about the children, I've only ever seen two groups of people do this. I never see like queer parents, and I literally almost never see like parents of queer children do this shit. Unless they're very conservative. Conservative parents do this shit all the fucking time because to them their kids are political pawns. And the other
Yes,
group of
of
people
course.
who do this are people who don't even fucking have kids. A lot of it, I mean, that's sort of like I'm trying to figure out like why it is that like so many young people do it, and I don't think that it's. I mean, some of it's being inexperienced with the queer community for sure. Some of it's just being a cocky idiot at that age. I think there's that too, because like when you're young and you get that this discourse is going around, you want to participate, but you don't always know exactly what to say.
I think
And I
also
think
part of
that
it is a lot of the young people nowadays got their queer ethos from like Tumblr and stuff. And the ethos on Tumblr was very everyone must be comfortable, which like if you do a little more thought and expansion and growing that out, that can become, you basically get virtue ethics. But if you don't, you get, we must stop things that make other people uncomfortable rather than thinking, oh, well, that person's comfort matters too, or what are my alternatives to make myself comfortable without disrupting them, things like that. And because they haven't had time to flesh out those ideas and form a coherent ethos out of them, you get takes like kink shouldn't be at Pride because it might make some people uncomfortable.
yeah, well, I mean, I think in life you have the right like to be comfortable broadly. I think you have the right to find happiness. I mean, not right is the wrong word, but I think you're entitled to, not have like all happiness stripped away from you at some level. But I don't think you're entitled to be comfortable all the time. I think that discomfort is a part of living in a society is not always liking the things that other people do. And like I really do wonder what the fucking point is, right? Because the two effects of this seem to be either shaming the kinksters or just policing them. Just like actually just like appealing to the law. Which like if you're appealing to the law to try to stop people from like engaging in self-expression, I have no sympathy for you. Fuck off. Like that's
Fuck
you're
off.
an insane idiot and you've completely regressed back to the worst fucking position. I mean it's actually kind of a threat in I mean this is to a lesser degree because of everything else we've talked about. But it's actually kind of comparable. The comparison I made is like to hate speech laws. The way that it's understandable to not want to hear that kind of stuff and to not want to empower that kind of language. But the effect that you're going to get when you endow the government with the ability, every time the government gains the ability to limit speech, you know what they're going to use it for.
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, to
Like,
censor opinions that go against the government and those in power's wishes.
if there was a law against saying the N-word, the number one group of people who would get targeted for that, I guarantee you, would be black people.
Exactly.
100%. And that's expressly the opposite of what we would be intending with that kind of law.
Well, I actually
Did I
want
just make an argument for saying the? I'm not saying you should say it, because that's the other half of this.
Yeah, that's like the difference. But like,
I mean, what you're describing is the difference between what should be enforced via social mores and what should be enforced via law.
yeah.
Right. Well, then I
sometimes
also don't
sometimes the
think
two like are kind of
We should not have a
indistinguishable.
law
Where, like,
saying no one can say the N-word, but social mores saying, most people should not be saying the N-word. That makes sense.
Right. Well, then I mean,
Kelsey, we
at
can't
that
hear
point,
you.
you come up against the King thing, which is obviously not the same thing, because like, do we seriously believe that children are being harmed by kink? And I think the answer, if you're actually engaging with the material, is no, you don't believe that.
Oh no, they think kids are going to be harmed or are harmed by these things, which is fucking crazy to me.
Here's the
I
other
think they're
thing.
disgusted. I think they're using the children kind of as a battering ram to like front their disgust at kink.
Look, they're disgusted, one, but two, they're hypocrites because we know there are fucking freaks too. Like, they actually are. I can tell
Oh
you.
my god, yeah, that's the
I
other
can tell
thing.
you. Look, I've told Kelsey some things, but June can fuck off with her shit. She can fuck right off. I'm not gonna say anything.
I don't think someone being kinky and thinking kink should not be displayed in public are incompatible beliefs. You can believe very well that it's should be kept to private spaces. But my thought, this a slight tangent that's still related. I just had this thought that people who think there shouldn't be kink at Pride, one, don't understand what happens at Pride or what it's to commemorate, but also they don't understand kink. Like, even ignoring for a moment that no, people aren't like having sex right there in the Pride parade. Like,
boo.
Kink takes a lot of different forms. Service kink submission is a thing. If I am out in public with one of my subs and I tell them to go like, here's my money, go get me a soda from that store, that's a kink thing. That's dom sub behavior that nobody notices as kinky.
Yeah.
But it is for us.
Kelsey.
It just makes me think of the fucking scene like Clockwork Orange, I think it is, or I actually haven't seen Clockwork Orange. I really should, but
you should.
In that, or in I think it's called A Red Dragon or The Red Dragon, something like that. It's the sequel to Silence of the Lambs. I think technically a prequel. But it's yeah, there's a scene where they're like the serial killer or whatever will make somebody watch something. Like they'll pry their eyes open and like make them look at it. And like I feel like that's what people are like acting like with kink.
Oh wait.
Absolutely.
Is Kelsey
But,
having troubles talking? Kelsey, can you try?
Am I echoing when you guys are talking?
No, you're not.
No.
Oh, because I can see my thing lighting up, and I'm not sure if it is, so I keep muting myself.
No, it's working. But I mean, you were trying a bit. All we heard was like just a little thing. All right, just checking.
Yeah, it's cool.
Oh, I actually have something to read. I linked it in the Discord, but I think it's very relevant. Quote, "We are staring down the barrel of at least 4 years of intersectional conservatism, accelerating at speeds we have never seen before."
What's that from?
It's just the meme post. I linked into Discord. It's just because it's replying to like something where it's just okay, that's it. We gotta start hunting down and killing tender queer teens from now on. This shit's getting fucking disgustingly insane.
Yeah, my God, dude. I do think it's insane that a lot of the anti-SJW people and a lot of like the tenderqueer people are on the same position. And I really do wonder, like with someone like June, like what's her deal with regards to that? Is it like a you have a right to be comfortable thing, or is it literally just like a oh my God, think of the children? Because like I've never seen her post about it without doing a think of the children. Can't engage with it from any other perspective.
Fuck your child.
But not literally.
I think part of the thing is they like it's a hard argument to deal with and explain why it's dumb, because you end up sounding like you just genuinely hate kids, and like that's a good way to
I'm
get people to
tuning
hate
into
you.
one of the child-free people right now as we speak. I'm 100% going down that path now. These people have enticed me to hate children now,
I
and I
mean, at this
can't.
point,
Kids
I
are
mean, at this
great.
point, I can't have kids if I wanted to. So
Me,
Well,
it's
I
just
just
because
remember that bit. I don't know if you guys remember that, but like he uses a phrase child worship to talk about like all the ways in which society is like at little levels just completely being restructured around like what the adults think the needs of the children are and not like what children actually need to like develop well.
yeah, I remember that skit really well, actually.
What a genius. What a genius. I actually love Carlin, and I do think it's funny the more that like anti-SJW people like get away from Carlin. That's incredibly funny to me.
yeah, they used to like libertarians would like quote just like clip out his like rant on like climate change and like not understand his point is like it's it's just
Yeah.
like the worst misreading, like not understanding he's talking about you.
Yeah, his point was also very much we need to deal with climate change because the Earth will still be here, but you know what won't? Us.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, because the logic of environmentalism like is really amazing to me, and I think that's one of the things that I'm gonna have to at some point stop reading like Marx and Adorno and like go read somebody who has like insight on like environmental issues because that is like
There's a few good books on Marx and ecology. I want to read those too.
yeah, I mean I've heard good things from I think Doe said that she was reading something. I know Zia's been on an agriculture kick for quite some time now.
I think she was reading Scott, a quote unquote like
Just
anarchist who
Scott.
like quote unquote anarchist sort of anthropologist, I guess, but who also funnily enough we know he donated to fucking Warren.
Amazing.
Oh yeah,
Amazing.
but
Dude,
I'm
fucking Elizabeth Warren, I swear to God. Where's her ass these days?
dude, she's, I've I don't know actually. I don't know what's happened to her. Is Kelsey trying to talk again?
No?
Oh, okay.
Not allowed.
It's yeah, your thing is lighting up. It's like there's not much coming out. It's just like a little sound. I don't know what
Kelsey,
that
what are
is.
your thoughts?
Yeah, come on, autism cat, speak.
Well, don't put me on the spot. That's mean. You put the autistic cat on the fucking pedestal and expect it to talk to you?
Yeah,
Yes.
Oh god, I feel like a fucking showroom car on a fucking TV show. Okay, what do you want my takes on?
Kink at Pride, I
Just
guess.
Kink at Pride?
If you have anything that hasn't been said,
I
that's what we're talking about.
shit. Well, I don't even know where to go from, but like, other than fuck your child, I guess. Literally, my opinion isn't very formed on it.
But
So
not literally.
I mean, I'll just
no,
add.
don't fuck your child. Just like no, I'll
You
fucking
said
cunt your
literally,
child.
and I
Like
was
it's
like,
fucking
wait,
simple.
don't get us in trouble.
Oh my God, here, the, I'll just add. The same logic. You know the people who just like I'm gonna see like one of the guys with wearing like the fox mask things. Like if I see that, I'm just calling the cops. You know how fucking crazy that is? Well, to be fair,
Yeah.
it's sort of like the same logic that's used to just like call the cops on black people, quite literally.
Mm.
Yeah,
And
pretty much.
I
Not doing anything illegal, but we're gonna call the cops on you anyway.
and for like from experience, like I do mean this like literally. Like my ex, who was like quite a visibly like like queer like woman, right? Would just have the fucking cops like called on her because because her like daughter is like white passing. Which is funny because when I was with her, no one would fucking question anything because I looked like the father. But the moment she's fucking alone, it's like the fucking whiteys just get real fucking upsetio, spaghettio. And so,
Ladies, it's like 1950.
I mean, yeah, they look like,
I
oh my
like
god,
what
it's a black woman that like looks visibly like queer with a kid. That's not fucking possible. Has to be something weird going on. Just like, and it's just fuck's
You know
going
what?
on?
It honestly kind of reminds me of have you seen that post that was going around about like the black woman who was like a teacher, but she was like skinny, but she had like a really big butt. And
Hmm. I think I remember,
she
maybe.
yeah, for whatever reason, um like people somebody posted, like some guy posted, he was like, is this appropriate for a teacher? And everybody was like, well, what do you want her to do? Like take her butt off? And it's like yeah, I mean that's amazing. I think that people should watch and read John Berger's Ways of Sex,
Kelsey, you should
because I
probably
think that
mute. We're just hearing like a little like beeps and stuff.
getting a little feedback.
Yeah,
That's just cat noises.
we had a cat
Yeah,
noise.
known cat noises. I do that sometimes. I'm actually a robot. Yeah. Um, to go back to like what Luna said a while ago, I like that she mentioned like it can be a kink thing to get your sub to order you a coffee, but no one speaks about it. And the reason no one speaks about it is because it's not queer. And so when someone dons like a pup mask, that's queer, and suddenly that becomes a problem because it's queer. But if you get your sub to order you a coffee, no one complains because ordering a coffee for someone is not seen as queer. But I like the distinction. I like that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know
Well,
what
I
else
mean,
is like fucking like something that's like super kinky, but like is now like on the up and up? Is the fucking trad wife type shit. Like no one will convince me that's not a fucking kink thing. I don't care. Like
I have been into that as a kink since before all these memes.
yeah, but like
yeah, that's
I
definitely
no, but like,
that's
even the conservatives, where it's like their actual like like that's literally just their dream because they want to just have big family and just like the trad family. It's also that's also kinky. Like I don't know, that's like a fucking kink to them. Even if like they have this whole like ideology where it's like that's that's like their duty.
well, I could imagine seeing it from like conservatives, but it is really funny to see
It's
like
indistinguishable from a kink, honestly. That's the funny part.
well, it's funny to see this shit from like people who make their identity around being like a gamer or like liking anime or something, because it's like, well, I mean, kids play those games. Do you want your like big titty waifu censored from the games? Because this is how you get your big titty waifu censored from the games.
What's his name? You remember the lawyer, like the funny meme lawyer with the video games? Oh fuck, what's his name? Jack.
Was it
Jack
Jackson?
Thompson.
Jack
Yeah.
Thompson. We need a Jack Thompson for
Yeah.
fucking kink. We need we need like this a meme guy who just like his whole shtick is just suing like pride parades and just being like just a complete moral panic and just like he just like makes up a bunch of like like I don't know where there's like child trafficking rings like arranged in like pride parades, and then we have all the tender queers like start to just buy into it, and just you just find out it's like all fucking lies, and it's just
Oh
you
man,
just
who's gonna be our like mole? One of us has to make a sacrifice and be like a Jack Thompson type character. Cause man, if you could get like elected or something to public office and be that guy, I think that'd actually be huge. That'd be a great pro kink thing if you could just be an obviously like fucking idiotic, ridiculous anti-kinkster.
Yeah, like that is one thing Jack Thompson did that was good for gaming, in that he was so incompetent it kept anybody competent from doing their thing.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to go back to what Kelsey said about it's queer, and like I think Kelsey meant like it stands out, but like it's also queer in the sense of LGBT things. A common refrain I've been hearing this year is no one says anything about Mardi Gras, and like some people do. Obviously, there's always some people complaining about something, but yeah, by and large, Mardi Gras is just like, yeah, it's Mardi Gras, whatever, and like it takes over an entire major city for a week, and it's just this celebration of drinking and drugs and sexuality and all that, all these excesses. Admittedly, it is then followed by the biggest guilt period of Catholicism, but
Amazing.
like that's the entire point of it,
That's
to lead into
practically a
Lent.
kink in and of itself.
I know for a fact it is, but the but people aren't saying no boobs at Mardi Gras because it's straight. The women, there's an implication, just because there's cultural defaults and they're not being challenged, that the women are you know skimpily dressed and showing their chests off and so on for men and all that. Things are
There's
kept very
more
hetero, or
nudity.
at the very least, not expressly made queer, which lets the default cultural narrative say that they're hetero. Meanwhile,
There's
Pride is expressly going, we are not playing by society's rules because society's rules are harmful, and that's a lot of why people are lashing out like they are.
there's more nudity in New Orleans every weekend than there is in the month of Pride across the nation, like every year. You can't convince me these people genuinely care about nudity and about children.
No, like always in conservative politics, children and are a scapegoat for we want our power.
Yeah,
And we want the
I
power
don't
to
know.
just
People,
like
people are just disgusted by King. Because, I mean, that's a lot of it redounds to just calling Kingsters freaks. I mean, you've probably noticed that as well.
so
Where it's
true.
always like, oh,
Definitely.
and it's like, yeah, I
My
see,
main
I
my
see.
main my main circle is kink Twitter. Of course I've seen that.
I mean, the whole anti-kink thing is just another aspect of cultural control, and that's why from so much media you find this anti-kink stuff.
I think that that's true.
Yeah, absolutely. Like
mean-
at the end of the day, that's what all of this boils down to.
The reason the trad thing is kink now is because it's not the social norm. Back in the day, like that would have just been the norm, so it wouldn't be kinky. But nowadays, it's not the norm, so it is kinky. It's like, I mean, is
Mm,
that these days? Like, do you look at anal and think, yes, kinky? But like, at a point, that would certainly be kinky if you go back far enough, right?
I mean, it also depends on the context, I guess.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I think, I mean, part of what makes the trad thing kinky to me is that it's based on like a false historicism, like a fetish of history.
it's literally
So-
Stepford kink. It's literally the same as the people who fetishize the Stepford wives. And I'm saying this as someone who does that.
I'd like a Stepford wife. No,
Like-
fuck it. I'd like
like-
to be a Stepford wife.
Like I want to say that like fetishizing the trad wife ideal probably does date back to, Stepford Wives. I just looked it up, came out in 1975. That's probably when it started.
Yeah, it's entirely possible.
that's pretty
Well, I think
influential.
it's the appeals to tradition are very funny as well because I think I mean, tradition is so subjective to like its time and place. People have this idea about like the traditional family unit, and it's like, oh, so the 1950s is what people mean
And they don't
when they say
mention
that. But they don't mention all of human history before that.
no, but
That's not tradition.
they don't even mention that like people were cheating all the time too. Like it's like, oh, you think the husband just was content with the wife? Like, sorry, I'm pretty sure a lot of the sex was like pretty fucking mediocre because that's kind of what happens when you just try to put two people together. They don't really even love each other because it's sort of like a
Well,
contractual thing between families. It's just
one of the valid observations that Betty Friedan makes in The Feminine Mystique, like one of the few things that I agree with like second wave feminists on, is that there was a genuinely good observation that like women in their suburban homes were not happy. They were not having a good time.
of course not.
They were actually like, and I think this is I mean, if you really want my extremely hot fucking take, I think that there's a lot of this still today. But we had like words for like special diseases that only women get when they're like dissatisfied in the home, and like we special like because and they were experiencing real symptoms. It was not they were not making up being like distressed and or in pain or unhappy or stuff like that.
Hysteria. Hysteria. I mean, it's not even like 1950s. Like that just goes back to like 19th century too. Like,
Yeah,
Yeah, hysteria and the wandering womb shit was much more Victorian era.
Yeah, by the time of the 50s, like I read this magazine from the 50s that is like Fate magazine, which is just like this esoterica magazine. And it was already making fun of like the diagnosis of frigidity, which is, the woman doesn't want to have sex, and it's like, oh, doctors will claim it's this mental disorder, but really it's just their husbands are bad in bed and don't satisfy the wife.
I mean, I've personally heard like my mom like was in one of those marriages, right? Like married to like an engineer guy, right? And, like motherfucker would just like come home to like a wife like wearing a apron and nothing else, and would not fucking do anything. Like of course there's like a woman's gonna become fucking quote unquote frigid if like like Jesus, like there's just
Yeah. when all sex has to happen on one of the two members' schedules and in the way that one member wants, regardless of if the other member wants it or not, yeah, of course that second member, the one who's not being catered to, is going to dislike it.
Yeah.
Like that even holds
I mean,
in,
I think
people
that's
think
part of
kink relationships don't work that way, but they do. The sub gets something out of it too. It might look like it's all on the dom schedule, but like the sub's going with it because they like it that way.
And
Yeah, well, I mean, and I think that there's arguments to be made for both, but somebody once made a post that got pretty popular where they said that in a sense in a kink situation the sub has more control,
yeah.
and I think that there's a point to which that can be true.
Does a dom
Both
have
have
like?
equal. I think both have equal control. It's just
I
people put it
think
that
they
way
control the
because you don't
situation in
expect.
different realms.
Yeah, people put it that way because you don't expect the sub to have power, but good kink is it is at all times a back and forth communication by the dom and sub to produce the best results.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a lot like just good sex in general that way.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. All sex needs to be that way. We just don't. We just have these cultural scripts and narratives of what it's supposed to be like that people tend to default to because we don't teach people how to discuss their own sexual needs ahead of time or in the moment.
Or it's just like, I mean, I'm always like just astounded when I just like talk to women and I just hear the horror stories. It never ceases to just horrify me. It's not even like, okay, there's like a million stories of like just, it's like not even using lube for anal, like, and then like I hate it, and then the moment like lube is used, like, wait, I actually like this, and it's just it's stuff like that across the board where it's like there's not even like there's not even like a curiosity about like the other person, where you would like if you basically like asked, like, had the ability to just observe things and try to ask questions, like already you would be like 99% better for it, if that makes sense. And
No, I agree.
Absolutely.
but people
100%
just like
agree.
enter sex and it's sort of like they're in a way they do it, but like with the expect with like they have these whole like cultural like expectations of like how it's supposed to go. I don't know if it's like a porn, maybe like I don't want to like blame porn for it exactly. I mean, maybe
No, I don't think you can.
because I never like took like porn seriously in that way. In the same way that like I never took video games seriously in that way. My parents just taught me like fiction and all that. Like you need to understand like
Well, I was having a discussion with this about this recently, where I've come to the conclusion that the reason conservatives act like we cannot tell reality from fiction is because they cannot. Like, my brother was playing Halo at like 8. And when he started playing Halo, my parents sat down with him and were like, okay, so this is fiction, and in reality, shooting people is bad, and war is bad, and
yeah.
all that. And he understood it because even an 8-year-old understands the difference between reality and fiction. And like, you know, when my parents found out we were that one of us that I was looking at porn, they had a similar conversation with me, like, that's fiction, it does not accurately reflect reality, and you should remember that. And I already knew that, but like, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything special about porn passing down normative concepts of sex and sexuality. I
I
think that you could
think
just as easily say that thing about all other cultural scripts around sex.
I
I think
think
that
there's a
like
little bit where porn isn't a special occasion, but it's one of those things we've done to ourselves.
Oh,
Porn is often people's first exposure to sex and sexuality, and there is no competing voice. With violence, we do have, lots and lots of media saying, violence is wrong, war is bad, all that, but we don't have examples of healthy sexuality that a child can experience, and we have often parents very unwilling to discuss that with their kids. So
yeah.
while there's a problem, it's a very fixable problem that we did to ourselves.
And to be honest, like porn nowadays, like there's like like there's so much like variety in it. Especially like it's very clear when you see like some studio thing and then like when it's just like a couple fucking on camera.
Oh, absolutely. And like conservatives don't understand that porn has shifted and they believe it's all this studio porn stuff. But
And it's
like,
just yeah, it's just like trafficking or like just it's always like
also,
in there, you know.
I think porn nowadays more than ever embraces its artifice. Studio stuff looks a certain way, basically to play up the image of studio porn. Amateur porn leans into the weird and the narrative and stylistic aesthetic aspects that studio porn never really touches, but amateur porn, especially through queer creators, can really get into.
Yeah, I don't even really know that much about like amateur queer porn. I just know like yeah.
I mean, I 100% agree. Like, and I do think it's really funny because a lot of liberals buy into the exact same lie that like art is gonna make you be evil or something along those lines. The idea that like art can make you behave in a way that's completely against your values otherwise. It's the exact same script conservatives ran about like rap music in the 90s, and now like you see it a lot from liberals when they talk about like Scorsese films and shit like that. It's gonna make you violent.
Yeah, when like we can tell reality from fiction.
Absolutely.
Which is like re- uh, how to say this? Reminds me of the old like was it the Daily Show Colbert? They used to say this like reality has a quote unquote like liberal bias. Which is like really
I
funny
mean,
when you think about it. Like, which
yeah,
is
that is. I mean, that is pretty funny. Well, part of that's the result of viewing like the political spectrum in a very like as a system of like 2 points between liberal and conservative.
and also like that's what conservatives like think also, but like in a
I mean,
way like yeah.
when they say reality has a liberal bias, they mean it in the way American politics uses liberal to mean, like anything left of Mussolini.
Yeah,
I mean,
Like to American politics, leftism is a liberal ideology because it values human life.
fuck human life.
one might make the argument that a lot of leftists are liberals regardless.
Shocking.
If one wanted to be controversial, one might consider scripting a video for YouTube called something like "The Big Lie of BreadTube" or something like that.
Oh,
I'm not saying I would do something like that, but
sure.
wouldn't it be funny?
But circling back a little again to the reality from fiction sort of tangent, like I have taught classes on roleplay heavy kink before, specifically like religious themes. And in it, I talk at the beginning a bit about misappropriation of cultures. And the gist of what I said is it's actually kind of okay to misappropriate minority cultures for your play, because what you're going to do first, because you both are entering into this knowing it's play, is either explicitly or implicitly agree that you're engaging in a fiction and that anything you're doing in that fiction is not representative of the real world. Like I talk about engaging in religious play while also being a cult survivor. I know what the difference between the two is.
Oh, interesting.
And I think you can keep in mind that what you're engaging in is a fiction because like I said, we can tell fiction from reality. So as long as everyone involved knows it's a fiction, which again, pretty easy to do, um you it's not going to impact you the same way as if you think it's reality, which again, I feel like conservatives don't have the ability to do, but at least like that's the impression I get from the way they talk about the difference. But if you're keeping it in mind, it's okay to engage in problematic things in fiction.
Well, it's almost, how to say this? Like the inability to engage, like in whatever way with like quote unquote problematic things, and like you give it almost like a supernatural power over you or over other people. Is oh God, we're looping
Is
back.
that fetishism again? Do
No,
we
we're no
regress
no
to
we're no
previous segment?
we're looping back around to the N word here. Like like there's some like there, the way people like argue against the use of it sometimes it's how to say this,
Right, as if knowing it or seeing it is going
as
to
if
make you
just
more
like
racist. Yeah.
imagine if like I was like quite literally just like reading off the infamous like Republican that went on TV and just talked about the Southern strategy and he just said the N word over and over again.
Yeah.
Like, personally, I think it's a good thing when you're reading off that quote to not censor it. I think there's an
Yeah.
impact there. I think there's an impact. You need to say, the word to just be like, that's the word that's being used, right? Because
Well,
there's,
that was a thing that happened a lot with the Trump administration is he would say something really fucked up, and when the news would report it, they would try to like describe it without actually reporting what the literal president of the United States said. And at a certain point it's like, no, just you have to print the words he said. I know it makes you feel dirty or whatever, but you have to print the words he said. He's the fucking president. Also, are you a child?
yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it's most appropriate to keep the vulgarity in the vulgar.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
because
vulgarity or the racism. Like, if
yeah,
someone like just is gonna call you the N word, like literally, like instead of just like being like, oh, he called me the N word, just like called you. I'm not gonna say it, but you know, there's an impact to that word. There's a there's a punch to it.
yeah.
There's historical context that if you remove it, it kind of neuters what was said. It can make a very egregious to a more passable one. So it's important that you keep that egregious part so that people know what was really said.
Which is funny. The reason I've been thinking about this, I listened to like the Finkelstein interview on TrueAnon, and he just says it. It's bleeped out, but he talks about Yiddish or like Hebrew words that were like slurs, right, for black people, and he just says like, okay, that's the equivalent to like the N word, calling someone the N word.
Does he say the N-word?
It's bleeped out. He literally says it, but TrueAnon bleeped it out.
Oh, I guess I understand why they did that.
There is a point at which you sometimes have to use vulgarity or things like that. First of all, because if you are decrying whatever is using that
I mean,
the
he was
words,
talking about like his parents being called the N word because they were like Jews over from Europe, like quite literally.
yeah, especially if you're decrying whatever behavior you're quoting, it's important to quote the full thing because otherwise you do lose, the essence of the thing you're decrying. And if you're decrying, it'll be very obvious from the rest of what you're saying.
Yeah,
This is so funny.
it's a bit like refusing to invoke the name of God, but just the act of like like you're putting like an asterisk on like the word God, but to like replace the O with like an asterisk, or just not fully spelling it out, but we know what's there. Like, so what's the point?
It is very funny to me.
Like, everyone knows what that word is. Like, what matters is if you're actually fucking saying it to someone, or just if you're reporting like what someone just said. Like,
There's a part of me as well that kind of understands the impulse to like be disgusted or afraid at like certain words
mm,
because words have meaning and words can be hurtful.
yeah,
But I do think that people take it to a weird place where the word is more important. Words are like the most important thing, or like displays are the most important thing. And I just think that at a certain point you kind of have to like, I don't know, accept the alternative that that's not the case.
Yeah, it's like to a lot of people, the sight of a missile is a lot more scary than the aftermath. The sight of a slur is more impactful to them than the actual impact of that slur, and so they'll censor the sight of it, so to speak. If I'm making any
People
sense.
that feel those weird things too. No, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, people are fucking weird about it, to be honest. I don't really understand it.
well, they're kind of. Hmm. Hey, there is. What am I trying to say here? Actually, I don't really know. I mean, I was trying to
All
make
right,
maybe
well,
like there's some sort of like link between like the kink and pride thing and the N word, but no, I'm not gonna go there. That's
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't force that
that's
connection.
my melanin levels are not the right.
Closest thing I can think of is that censoring the kink at Pride uh, removes the context of what Pride is commemorating because, like, while the Stonewall was not itself like a kink club, it was very much a space where people were doing things outside the cultural norm. People were cross-dressing or they were trans people dressing their identified gender. Which was straight up illegal at the time. You could get arrested for it, and you know, it was a place where I mean, I don't know specifically the culture of Stonewall at the time, but I'm sure it was not a particularly clean place, given that it was like clean as in like non-sexual, because it was a gay bar at a time where being gay was heavily criminalized.
Huh.
Yeah, well, I mean, people definitely want to sanitize the community at large, I think. There's an impulse to just be like, no, we're normal. I promise, we're just like you. Well, I mean, here's a thought. Maybe they should be just like us.
Queering cisness.
Especially since Stonewall was itself kind of the point where we showed, hey, guys, assimilationism isn't working. Lashing out did something.
Yeah, well, that was a huge breaking point between those ideologies, but I think, and it is kind of funny because the groups that you usually hear it from are like people who aren't really connected with the queer community, if it's queer people saying it, or just people who aren't even fucking queer, because a lot of fucking idiots just say shit like, oh, gay rights was all about trying to get acceptance, but now you don't want acceptance. And it's
This
like,
is
well, no, that's ahistorical. You're wrong about that. But a lot of the people that I
It's not
hear say
even
it aren't even fucking gay.
it's not even ahistorical. It's misunderstanding what acceptance is, because if I scrub away all the things that make me queer to fit in with straight culture, I haven't been accepted. I've sanded myself down until they've decided I'm not worth picking on.
Yeah, essentially.
If I have to bleach my skin to be accepted as a black person, that's not black acceptance, that's black erasure.
nice.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And to a lesser extent, my family on my mother's side is very Irish, and the Irish went the assimilationist route, and a lot of Irish culture's been lost because of it.
Yeah, well, 100%. I mean, at this point, like, there's really no hard distinction between like Irish Americans and like just white people in this country. First of all,
And
every white person thinks they're Irish, so that's one thing.
And I think here's the other thing. It's the sort of other side of the danger of assimilationism. Assimilation is kind of last in, first out. If they ever have to start, if they ever gain a lot, if whatever group that's losing power, such as white supremacy has been over the course of the last 70 years or whatever, they're going or they start gaining power. If they start gaining power or losing power, either one could cause them to eject groups from the definition of whiteness, and that's going to be the groups that were put in most recently because they're the groups with the least hold on it. So the Irish went assimilationist, but it's not going to take much for the Irish to be back out.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know if you guys remember that Richard Spencer tweet, but I think it was like that one fighter, Conor McGregor or whoever,
Oh my
won
god.
like won a match, and he was like, "Congratulations, the Irish get to be white."
Oh my
And like
god.
it's 100%. Well, I mean, he's a delusional fucking idiot, but it's 100. Like he's just this little fucking Fauntleroy, but it's 100% the way of thinking that those people have.
Yeah,
You accept them
obviously Richard
traditional.
Spencer is a laughing stock of an idiot now, but he held power, and his beliefs haven't changed. When he had power, that's still what he thought. The Irish didn't deserve the whiteness that was tossed to them.
Or the Italians.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
Italians were a little less assimilationist. There's still a definite Italian culture. We still have Italian food that isn't integrated into the rest of our cuisine. It's a common food, but we recognize it as Italian.
well, it's worth pointing out that like a lot of Irish food, like such as it is, I mean, being in Ireland, like a lot of the good food there is like Indian food, and like there's obviously fast food, but like a lot of like the traditional Irish fare is, I mean, a few things that stick out to me is just stuff they make with potatoes, black pudding, and so many cheeses. They had a fucking practically like an entire cheese market, by Limerick, and I recall being there and just thinking like, yeah, I understand why people aren't obsessed with Irish food. There's really not a lot to be over the moon about.
Again, a lot of it's been sort of discarded though, because not only do you have Irish assimilation in America, you had oppression of Irish culture in Europe.
Precisely.
I mean, I think that's well. There's also I think there's kind of another lens to it as well, where like a lot of it, the, Ireland is not like a super hospitable place for a lot of different crops. Potatoes are one of the most resilient crops in existence, so that's why they grow potatoes there. And there's not a whole lot of other stuff. The cheeses there are mostly like goat cheeses and stuff you can get from goats and sheep, because they don't have like they can't raise like a lot of cows there.
Does the goat is like goat cheese here like euphemism for cum?
No, and gross, and shut up.
My point is still like they had a food culture, limited as their options were. They made use of them in as many ways as they could.
Well, they
Even the
still
one
do. They
thing-
still do in Ireland. They 100% still have it. I just think that, I mean, I'm just being a contrarian and saying like, I think there's a reason why we like Italian food more than Irish food, just
Well,
generally.
sure, but like we've basically completely lost Irish food. Even the one thing we think of as Irish food, corned beef, is basically more like Irish Jewish fusion cuisine because of a lot of complicated cultural things that led to the Irish not being able to get the cuts of, I think it was bacon that they usually actually used for that, but they had access to things their Jewish neighbors would use, which ended up becoming corned beef.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not going to keep playing the contrarian corner, Lauren's contrarian corner, but it is, I mean, that is something that you can 100% see. People talk about potatoes like they're from Ireland, but they're really not. Like all the food in Ireland is kind of like cribbed from other places.
Yeah. Well, at the same
don't
time,
think-
tomatoes aren't from Italy, but like they
Yeah,
did their
well,
own
that's
thing.
and then that's another great thing is they're actually from here. You're welcome, Italy.
Oh,
You're
they're-
welcome. We definitely didn't steal those from another group of people who used to be here.
Who still are here and want their land back.
Yeah, well, I was thinking here, specifically here, where I'm standing, because the Potawatomi are not here anymore. They moved, under threat of genocide. Most Native Americans are not here anymore. Some of them are. Respect.
What I'm go-
Do we
So-
have anything else we wanted to get to?
Yeah, I have a hot take. I have
All
a
right.
hot take.
Well, hey,
I posted in the Discord, but gay marriage being legalized has been a disaster for for the human race. Because okay,
well,
no,
I think the legal institution of marriage in general.
yeah,
Yeah.
which is no, but like think about it, like I feel like I've heard like this before, like said just like oh like gay marriage is legalized now, like that means like it's almost like in a way it's just used as like a showcase, like oh we're part of like the dominant culture now, kind of.
Yeah. It gave the people who other than being gay were already the thing culture wanted them to be, an excuse to bow out of supporting gay rights in general. They're like, well,
Exactly.
got mine, I can be out of here.
Yep, there you go. I get to marry, I get to have my fucking tax credits, I get to have my visitation rights. That's all I wanted. So like the quote unquote others, like the people that really bother me, the gay clubs or just at Pride, they can fuck off. Which is like
Yeah,
I've heard this personally from some people. I knew as a kid. I knew as a kid because they were friends with my mom. But yeah.
All right, how are we doing on time?
Oh, 1 hour 13 minutes. So, Alyssa
Well,
said
this might be a good.
Alyssa
Oh,
said
do you have one more thing?
Alyssa said she can hop on in a bit, so we could
Okay.
stop for now, and then when she's ready, we start the second time. We can talk about Israel. And it's a funny you mentioned like Richard Spencer. Richard Spencer said that Israel was his model, and he's not wrong. Well, so we'll talk about
Yeah,
that.
No, they're an authoritarian
Well, we have
genocidal
to save that for the next episode.
Yeah,
We're giving people
exactly.
a peek behind the scenes.
All right.
Well, but I'm probably not going to be on
much
that, so I
insight.
understand where he's coming from.
No, and he's right. He's right. We'll talk about that. He's right. So so the meme like heartbreaking. The worst person you know just made a great point. That's Richard Spencer on Israel.
That I mean, if you gave that picture of that guy from that article like the fucking like side shave like haircut, he'd look a little bit like Richard Spencer. Do you see it?
Yeah, kinda.
I can see
His
it.
face isn't quite so twisted by evil. All right.
He looks like a
thank you,
fucking
everybody.
blockhead.
You've been listening to the Low Hanging Fruits pod. Any closing comments? Anything to promote, guys? Anything we're doing?
Yeah, you should follow me on Twitter at Bordiga Cummies.
Dear Lord, dude. I have a
I'm
normal
not
Twitter
changing
name
it. I'm not changing it.
It's shut up. It's at Materialist Wife. is my Twitter handle.
Mine is Digiluna. That's DIGILEWNA.
And I believe mine is Kelsey Yuri Waifu? Question mark? I don't know. It's different than the last one I had since I got
It's
banned.
Kelsey _ Yuri Waifu is what it is, I think.
Yeah, I thought so too. Don't follow me. That's a bad idea.
Yeah, stop
will-
following her.
Yeah, I will spam your feed with fucking cats. That's all I do. I retweet
Normal.
pictures of cats whenever I see them. I'm normal, I promise. Please don't hate me.
All right. Well, thank you again for listening, and goodbye.
Goodbye.
I